The most common way to track instrument types, equipment types, and failure rate data is using the library. It's the most common and the most convenient. So instead of trying to develop your own failure rate characteristics, you will pull things in and out of the library. Before we actually go into doing that, the first thing we need to know about is the libraries themselves. So when you want to look at libraries, you need to leave the Vertigo study and go out into the Vertigo project manager area. And in the project manager area, in the navigation bar, you're going to see an icon called Library Manager. When you click on Library Manager, it's going to give you a list of all of the libraries that you have access to. Everyone will have access to the Kenexis standard library. This is a library that Kenexis provides and keeps up to date and has a very large number of both generic data based on field service and also equipment vendor provided failure data based on failure modes and effects analysis that the equipment vendors themselves perform. In addition to the Kenexis standard library, you also have the ability to create your own libraries. So if your operating company wants to have their own library and have that used for calculations instead of the Kenexis standard library, it's easy to do. Simply add a custom library. So that is where you can view the libraries and view the information contained in the library. So you'll see here, I'm going to bring up the failure rate data for sensors, and you'll see that there is a lot of information available. Now, going back into the project, we need to determine where, when you access a library, which library are you going to go to? So let me go back into the study, and in the navigation bar you will see a study settings button. So when you click on study settings, it will bring up the study settings dialog, and in the study settings dialog, the second item is which failure rate library do you want to attach to. By default it's going to be the Kenexis standard, but I can select any library that I want. So in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and leave the Kenexis standard database as the failure rate library to be used. Now, I'm going to go into, let's go to final element types. And if I want to add a new type of final element, what I can do is click on Add New Final Element Type the same way I did for custom. But in this case, instead of typing in custom information for a device that I would characterize myself, instead I'm going to pull the data directly out of the library. So I click this drop-down list and it allows me to pick data from our library. So let's just say, and again, we have a wide variety of items that you can change from, and you can sort based on any type of device that you're specifically looking for. You can sort and filter the database there. What I'm going to do though is I'm just going to go ahead and pull up some generic data for a, let's just go with an air actuated ball valve generic. When I click on that, it's automatically going to populate all the information, and you see that all of the information is grayed out. That's because you're not allowed to edit the information because it came directly from the library. And now I can go ahead and click Insert, and you'll see air actuated ball valve generic came into the list. Now, what's really important for you to know here is that the failure rate data is based on the project. Even though I pulled numbers out of the library, there are now two copies. There's the copy of the failure rate data that resides in the library and the copy of the failure rate data that resides in the project. We at Kenexis deliberately chose this format to allow the life cycle to proceed as smoothly as possible. So what we wanted to avoid is that when Kenexis makes changes to the library, we didn't want that to change your specific project calculations. That could cause things to go from compliant to non-compliant, not because of anything that the end user did, but because of Kenexis database changes. So instead, when you bring something into a project, you are making a copy of what was in the library at that point in time. Which would then leave you with the question of, well, how do I know that what I have is current? And in order to do that, we have a current with library light. So the current with library light will be green if the data that you have in your project is consistent with what is in the library. If it's red, that means that the library has changed, and you might want to consider changing what's in your calculations to match the library, or you can leave it as is. And if something is gray, that means that there is no connection between what is in the library and what is in the project. Usually this is because the component is a custom component, it's not associated with the library, or the other reason that that could happen is that the study that you created brought those components into the study before the functionality was developed by Kenexis to link the two databases. So as you can see, the actuated ball valve generic that I just brought in is green lighted because it is consistent with the database. So this gives you an optimum ability to leverage libraries of data, make sure that your projects don't get manipulated or changed because of changes in the library, but still allow you to know what the status is of your data with respect to what is in the library.